Arcane Season 2 is finally here. One of my very first videos was that Arcane review, and I cannot believe it's finally out. By the time that I'm recording this, it is like months after the show. Like, it's like a month after the show actually came out. So, like, I am very behind on this, but I have been extremely busy. I have been very, very busy the past few months. So, I finally am going to sit down and do a review on this series and the season as a whole. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because I want this to be a relatively short video of just me kind of explaining my thoughts and whatever. If you want a more deep dive, like, review where I like pick apart everything and like just really go deep into it, let me know if that's something you would be interested in seeing. But I just wanted to give my like quick thoughts, make this a very quick video, just explaining what I thought about the season. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. I was so close with so many of my theories. Like, it actually is crazy how close I got in some of my theories. Like, the whole thing with Mbessa, I nailed, except for the fact that it was Mbessa who was the more main villain than the Black Rose. But I completely called the Black Rose. The only part of the Black Rose that I did not call is that they were magical, which I actually said that there would be a villain in the show that was like a magical threat that would come to Piltover trying to, mess with Piltover. I just kind of conflated the two. Like, I had two different theories. I had one that was going to be Ambessa's villain, and one was going to be the magical villain, and it was just the exact same villain. So I was so freaking close. There were so many times in my theory video that I was just this close to things. The furthest thing that I had was that I thought that Mel was going to die. I said that Mel was going to die. I thought that Mel was going to die. I never expected that they were going to go the route of making her like this weird mage thing. I never thought of that. Never crossed my mind. So, for that, I got completely wrong. So, like, most of my theories revolved around Jace being the one instigating the war in Piltover and Zon. It was not Jace, it was Caitlyn who did all that. So, like, I was really close. I was so freaking close. But, like, there were so many times that I would, like, say something that was true, just not all the way true. I highly recommend checking that video out, though. It does not age well. It did not age well for quality-wise. But, like, I was so freaking close on so many of my theories. So, let's start with the negatives, because there's so much to be said positively about the show that there's not a lot negative that I had. So I want to start with the negatives that I had with the show. I felt like the show introduced a lot of information at a very, very quick pace that it managed to kind of forget about plot lines halfway through the season. And this happens a lot. And it's not so bad that it's like makes the entire season just completely unwatchable, like a lot of shows wind up doing, where like they'll introduce plot points and they just abandon them. But like there's a lot of plot points that just get started and then half-assed finished. And like they're finished, but like it's not finished to a point where it's like, well, you feel like you want a little bit more of the storyline and then it's just abandoned. For instance, one of the worst examples in the entire show, and I know y'all are all going to say Caitlyn's storyline. That is not what I'm talking about. I think that Caitlyn's storyline was done fine. Yes, there could have been more to it, but that's, a complaint for another time. No, the worst example of this in the entire show is Savika's plotline. Savika is completely sidelined. And I get, she's a side character. She's really not that important. But I genuinely thought that she would be more than just no one. She's in a couple scenes in the first act. She's in a couple scenes in the first episode of Act 2, which is episode 4. And then just fucks off and vanishes for the entire rest of the show. I'm not kidding. She does not speak a word of dialogue for the rest of the show. I don't know if, like, her voice actor had, like deadlines that she couldn't meet. I don't know if they like fired her halfway through the show. I have no idea what happened to her, but she just vanishes. Like, her voice doesn't appear anywhere else in the entire show. After episode 4, she does not speak again. And I felt like this was doing this character really dirty because she meant a lot in season 1. Even though she was, again, a side character, she was a henchman. She was very interesting. She was a very intriguing character. To just vanish in season 2 felt very forced and very strange. And then she's like on the council at the end of the season, which was very forced because it wasn't earned, in my opinion. Because again, she vanishes. She's gone. Vamoose. Le bleu. gone. So how is she on the council? How did she earn this? If anything, Vi should have been on the council, because Vi was the character that you were seeing the whole show. Like, Vi should have been on the council, or freaking anyone else could have been on the council. Like, this felt extremely strange that they just put Savika on the council because Savika is the character that they wanted to be on the council from the beginning, but then she just vanishes. It's like, it's very strange to me. And I do agree with some of the criticisms of Caitlyn's character arc being very strange and very rushed. I felt like there were a lot of scenes that we didn't get off screen, and I think that the reason they did that personally is that they didn't want to make Caitlyn look like a bad person, because they knew that they had to kind of redeem her. They kind of had to make her the good guy at the end of the show. And by making her this like evil dictator that they were trying to like act like she was, they didn't want to show us her doing that, so they just time skip. Which, again, was, fine. It wasn't like the end of the world. That wasn't even a main plot point. Like, it didn't really matter. But for Caitlyn's character, it felt like they kind of left that in the dust by episode 5. Or, well, 6, because she, like, betrays Ambessa in episode 6. So, like, from episode 3 to episode 6, she's, like, barely in. Like, there could have been a lot more scenes with, like, Caitlyn's descent to madness and then kind of, like, redemption out of it. But, like, they really don't. They really don't show any of that. It's more, we hear that the Undercity doesn't like her. We hear that she's the general. But then also, at the end of episode 3, when Ambessa declares martial law, she calls Caitlyn her general, but then in episode 4, she calls her the commander. Which, maybe it's just me, but that felt really weird watching. Was it just me? Like they call her the general, and then they call her the commander. And it's like, where the hell did that go? I also didn't really care for how, like, Isha's sacrifice. Like, she sacrifices herself, but then no one ever mentions Isha again. Like, her sacrifice meant something. Like, I'm not saying that it didn't, but, like, I felt like someone would have mentioned her other than Jinx. Like, anyone. Anyone would have been like, hey, this kid died. Like, no. No one mentions her again. Like, it's not brought up again. It just felt very out of place for such a character that, like, they tried to build up as such an important character to just vanish after they die. Like, I don't really like when characters do that, and I didn't really care for that.
One issue that I completely forgot to talk about in this video that I had with the show was the entirety of the Black Rose plotline. I did not care for how the Black Rose was handled in the show at all. I felt like it was very sidelined and just kind of vanishes, and it doesn't really serve all that much of a point of the overall story of the show. Like, the only thing that we really get out of it is obviously Ambessa's motivations and Mel's powers. But Ambessa's motivations doesn't make a whole lot of sense because this is the thing that like scares her enough to start this entire like conflict, and yet we really don't see enough of the Black Rose to really get that vibe that they're like an actual threat. The only time that they actually get a hold of Ambessa is after Mel gives like that weird necklace thing, and that's about it. So I found it very odd that they spent so much time trying to like make the Black Rose this like overarching threat, and they really served no purpose in the season.
But
Like,
on
I
with the
feel like that could have
positives.
been handled way better.
Pretty much everything else. The characters were so well done. Everything about Victor and Jace was done to perfection, except a little bit of time travel strangeness, like whatever. But again, it's one of these shows, like Arcane, in my opinion, is one of those shows where, like, it gets better the more you think about it, because it allows you to put pieces together in your head that the show doesn't necessarily explain, where you are able to kind of put together the dots in your head and kind of like look at scenes and witness, like, you get to rewatch things and be like, oh, I didn't notice that actually makes a lot of sense. And Arcane season 1 was full of this. Season 2, full of it. The same thing. It's the same whatever of like, it's just art. You just, the more you analyze it, the better it gets. And I think that Victor being the, like, the big bad at the end, like the big monstrous threat was done so well. And it's something that, like, you should have known. Like, you should have been like, oh, you know, he's clearly the villain. He's the bad guy. Like, he's a bad guy in the game. Like, this is clearly the direction they're going. But, like, you also can't really stand it happening because it's like Victor is such a good person at the season 1, and then you just see this descent, and it's just so well done. And bringing everyone together to, like, fight this one common enemy, which, you know, the first season was very, you know, like the struggles of, like, the Zahn and Piltover and this feud and this war and this prejudice. And then, like, season 2 knocks it out of the park with, like, none of this matters. Like, we're all people. We're all human. And when humans die, when the world is over by Victor's glorious revolution, none of this mattered in the end. Because who's going to tell the story of our petty squabbles when we're all dead? That's kind of the message of this show, is that your evilness and whatever, like all this problems that go in the world don't matter at the face of this threat, of the Arcane, of the problems that are in the world. None of it actually mattered. And I think that was really well done. Ambessa was a perfect secondary antagonist. I really liked how they done Ambessa. She's just, like, basically the opposite of Silco. Silco is very cunning, very calculated, very planning, but he's very weak physically. And Bess is the exact opposite. She's not a very good planner. She's not a very good cunning person. She's good with her fists, and that's about it. But she manages to bring such a presence to the screen that every scene she's in, you want to see more, and that's how Silco felt. Granted, she is nowhere near as good as Silco, but she manages to hold the attention when she's on screen like Silco was able to when he was the villain. And I think that is what this show is really good at, is really making characters, like, there's no character that you see on screen and you're just like, ugh, it's this character. Like, there's a lot of shows where, like, you see a character and it's like, oh my god, I don't care about this character, I want to see this character. The only character in the entire show that I was personally like this with was Heimerdinger. Because Heimerdinger, in my opinion, was kind of a pointless character in the entire show. I think that he had a point. I'm not saying he was pointless, but he was very, like, he overall doesn't matter to the overall story that they're trying to tell. And in season 1, he's more of a symbol. He's like a symbol of, like, the old Piltover. Like, he's kind of like the old stereotype of, like, how Yoda was. Like, he's the old person you kind of point and laugh at to show the difference between the old and the new. He's kind of like the Master Yoda trope. And they, you know, subvert that to, like, he actually is a character by the end. But not really enough to be, like, a character. You see glimpses of his character by the end of the show, but, like, nothing that's like, this is a concrete whatever. The only thing we really know about him is that he's really old and doesn't really care about mortality. He's very whatever about mortality. He's like, wait 1,000 years, something will happen, because he knows he's gonna live forever. And, like, that pales really well with, like, the other human characters who are like, no, progress needs to happen now because we're not going to live forever. Things, we're going to die, and then all this was for nothing, so we got to do this now. And that's where Heimerdinger sits in season 1. And then in season 2, they create more of a character with him. He's more goofy, he's more whatever, but he's still the same character. I've heard a lot of people say that, like, Heimerdinger's like character assassination because he's, like, goofy in the season. He's not. He's the exact same character he was before. He just has more moments in this season where he's, like, actually, like, more of a character than he was in season 1. I didn't like how they just kind of killed him off, quotations, because he's not killed. He's not dead. Like, he's not dead. He's a Yordle. He doesn't even die. Like, he doesn't even, like, physically die. He just out of existence. Like, he's not dead. Let's make that clear. He is not dead. But I don't like that they just kind of write him out of the story in episode 7. Just gone. Boom. Like, I felt like that was a little strange. Episode 7, in my opinion, is the best episode of the show. Not because of, like, the writing or, like, the whatever. It's just my favorite episode to watch. It was so fun. It was such a good episode to just see all these characters and kind of see what could have been. And it gave you such a good message of, like, Echo giving up what could have been to create that in another world, because he wants to build this future for someone like him. He wants someone to have what he had in that other universe. And it really created Echo as one of my favorite. Like, it made Echo one of my favorite characters in the show because of it. Because Echo was kind of a nothing character in season 1, if we're completely honest. He wasn't like a bad character per se, but he doesn't even show up until episode 7, and then he's just like not really a character after that. Like, you don't really know who he is. You don't really know. You just know his motivations. You don't really know who he is. So this episode really cemented like what his motivations are, and like who he is and what he wants. And he wants this future. He wants this whatever. And then on the opposite side, you see Jace in this other reality where instead of wanting to create something like the other, he wants to stop this from happening. So it's the perfect dichotomy of like creating something that you see because you want it to be like this, and stopping something because you don't want it to be like this. It's the perfect way of doing the episode, and it's my favorite episode of the show. I really like how they did Jinx in this season too. It's very strange to watch Jinx in this season because it feels just like Jinx, but then if you watch season 1's Jinx, it's like 2 different characters basically. But like, it's not so different that it's just it's unbelievable, right? You know that it's Jinx. It just, when you watch season 1 and then you watch, like if you watch season 1 and you watch season 2 back to back, you're not going to notice it. But when you watch season 2 and then you rewatch season 1, it's like, what? Like, this is a completely different characters because of the way her character development goes. It's not like the writing just like flipped on a dime. Like, it's just her character development. She just grows so much in these seasons. And it's just, you see that character progression. And it's such a really good way of writing Jinx. And I really liked her character in this season. I really liked what they did with her. I liked that they made her kind of this like sassy, know-it-all kind of character. And like, she's very whatever. Like, she was like that in season 1, but nowhere near as much as she was in season 2. Like, season 1, she's very innocent seeming. Like, she's very, childish in a way. And then in season 2, she's way more grown up. Like, she's way more, like, kind of her own person. Which makes sense, because the whole season 1 was kind of building up to her being her own self. And then in season 2, she is her own self. It really worked. It really did what they were hoping it would do. The way that I would rate season 2 versus season 1 is that season 1 is absolutely perfect. Complete, across the board, perfect. There are no flaws. I literally cannot name one flaw that I had with season 1. From beginning to end, masterpiece. 10 out of 10 across the board. Season 2, on the other hand, is not perfect. There are dips in quality. There are problems. There are glaring issues that you're going to notice. But it reaches higher highs than season 1 does. It reaches moments that are so good that it outshines the mistakes, in my opinion. So you see, season 1, perfect across the board. Season 2, in my opinion, is better, but has dips in quality, whereas season 1 is perfect across the board. That's how I would rate it. Season 2's got to be probably a 10 out of 10, though. Like, there are moments of bad, there are bad moments, in my opinion, like the whole Savika plotline. There are things that are not handled the greatest. But ultimately, across the board, is really, really, really good. But yeah, let me know what you thought of the season in the comments. Please do not be a hater. That doesn't solve anything, obviously. If you don't like the show, just don't like the show. It's fine. But don't be a hater. That doesn't solve anything. And if you like the show, or you don't like the show, let me know what you think. And I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.